Hey everyone, happy Friday afternoon, right before a long weekend. I hope everyone's excited. I'm just gonna jump right into it. If you had told me in 2014, a year after I graduated college, that I would make my entire career decision based on a YouTube video that I watched, I would have looked at you in disbelief and kind of wondered how well you knew me. But as cheesy as it sounds, the person who didn't know me in 2014 was myself. Growing up, I loved video games. I played Nintendo 64 games, I played computer games, I played PlayStation games, but I never made the connection that I could be a game developer. I loved digital art, first with kid pics as like a tiny little toddler, then playing with MS Paint, Photoshop, but I never considered myself an artist. I got a degree in computer science, but I didn't consider myself a programmer because my internships had actually been in product management. So when I moved out here in 2013, I had this very stereotypical idea of what success in Silicon Valley looked like. It was a male. He probably dropped out of Stanford or another college, and he had raised millions of dollars based on an idea he had with buzzwords. And that wasn't me. And I thought that there was something wrong with me because I didn't fit that stereotype. Fuck that. So in 2014, I was going through a little bit of a crisis. I had moved out here with very little understanding of what it was that I actually wanted to do with my career or what was available to me. And I saw a YouTube video where a YouTube artist that I was talking, my favorite YouTube artist was talking about this thing called virtual reality. And she was so excited about it. And she was talking about the impact that this technology could have. It was really like the first or second time I had heard people talking about VR. And I had this moment that I describe as like this light bulb moment where it literally felt like the room got brighter when I realized, like, wait a second, this is a technology that I could work on. And as it turned out, there was a meetup happening just a couple of blocks away from where I lived that week of VR enthusiasts in Silicon Valley. So I went there knowing nothing about graphics development, knowing nothing about the VR industry or what you needed to do to become a virtual reality developer. And I asked everybody I met what they did, how long they had been working on it. Turns out most people, not very long. And I tried every demo that I could get my hands on in order to see what was happening in the space. And I walked away from that meetup knowing my life was about to be totally different. I had no real experience with graphics programming, but I went home and ordered an Oculus Rift, which was pretty much the only VR headset that you could buy at the time. And I committed myself that every night when I got home from work, I was going to learn how to become a VR developer. And so I would study tutorials online, which were few and far between back in 2014, but I knew that I had to figure out what this technology was. No one's ever going to tell you how to make your own way in an industry, particularly if that industry doesn't really have well-defined career paths or well-defined job titles. And so I set out on a mission to figure out my own journey. And I encourage you to do the same. If you find yourself looking at different technologies and wondering, I wonder what it takes to do that. I really want to do that. That sounds really interesting. That sounds really impactful. If I had waited for someone to tell me how my skills would line up to make value in the VR industry, I wouldn't be there. So a few months after I had gone to this meetup, I had gotten my chance to get my own hardware. I was doing pretty much everything wrong by what people would tell you if they were telling you how to run VR applications or develop them. I got a job offer at Microsoft for a technical evangelist role. If you are looking for a role in an emerging field and you're not really sure what to do, find a role that will let you learn. For me, as a technical evangelist, I was able to learn how to become a VR developer as I was teaching myself, and I was able to take that and turn that into resources that other people could use in the industry. Everyone needs a platform for what they're doing, and so for me, I chose Twitter. I started to write about anything that I learned, figuring, well, maybe like someone will someday find this interesting, or maybe this will help at least one other person, or maybe it will just help me in the future that I've written down what it is that I did and forgot how I fixed this problem or fixed this bug. And so as I taught myself how to work with game engines and I taught myself how to become a web developer, I was constantly documenting everything that I did. And I recommend that everybody do that, especially if you're trying to break into an emerging field, because we're really good at underestimating the value that we can bring to other people who are also trying to learn the same things that we are. So in my case, this was really clear one day when I wrote a blog post that had like 120 words about how to fix a Visual Studio error that was super obscure, but I hadn't found any good answer to when I had searched online. And that became my top viewed blog post. No idea. Like, I couldn't have gone into that blog post thinking like, oh, this is going to be helpful for, hundreds of people. I had underestimated that anything I could bring of value into this industry would have already been done. And it turns out that's not true then, and that's not true now, because there are a lot of different people out there with different skill sets, different backgrounds, and who learn differently. So for me, I wrote my tutorials because I found that almost all of the resources that were available at the time were in video form, and I don't learn very well watching videos. I wasn't expecting, as a technical evangelist, to be in a position where after like 10 months of teaching myself VR development, that I would be able to do things like fly to Germany and teach a class on VR development for a week. I felt wildly underqualified for that, and that's been a trend throughout my entire career, because I'm waiting for someone to say, this job that didn't really exist 5 years ago, like, yeah, you're totally qualified for that. You have to figure out your own qualifications, the things that are driving you, and figure out how to apply that to make and create that value in the space. So after a few years as being a technical evangelist at Microsoft and making my full-time job to learn, build, teach, and repeat, I was able to take the knowledge that I had built and start working at a virtual reality company based up in San Francisco called Fidelity. At the time, there were about 30 people who were working on the company, and I had spent all of my time over the previous few years building virtual reality content. And I joined Fidelity in a role that was very similar to what I had been doing before I got into VR. I was a product manager looking at how we could build out developer tools for virtual reality content. But I wanted to be hands-on in building things. And so a few months after I had started, our team started looking for someone to run a content development team on the engineering group. And as part of building a platform, you get the opportunity to create networks that you may not otherwise be able to. And this was important because I knew the guy who turned down the initial offer that they made to run this team. And I said, if they're offering him that job, I am definitely qualified for this role. And so I told my manager that I wanted to completely change teams, change career paths again, after having no experience working on a development team, and by every account possible, people would have had a reason to doubt my ability to do this. But, again, emerging field, people don't have an idea and know what success is going to be, and frankly, even if they think they do, they're probably wrong. There's a lot of bias in this industry. And so I was able to interview, I got the job, and then I spent 2 years constantly doubting my ability to do my work. I think that's a trend that I've heard a couple of times from some of the other speakers, that you have to constantly be reaching, and that's especially true as you're carving out this path in a field where the job titles aren't standardized, the tools aren't standardized, and the technology is still largely not standardized. But people will already find reasons to doubt what you're capable of doing. Don't make that decision for them. Instead, focus on proving them wrong. So after 2 years at Fidelity, where my team built content, where we had hundreds of people shared in shared virtual spaces, again, going out to prove them wrong, this is me up there with some of my friends in the virtual space. I don't know if I could pull off blue hair like up here on stage the way that I do in the virtual world. I decided that it was time for another change. And I joined Mozilla a few weeks ago, it's been about 2 months, as a senior product manager working on social VR. Again, if you've been following along or keeping track, my job titles have not been standard. I went from being a product manager to a technical evangelist to a product manager to a development lead to a product manager. And that's not a career path that I had sat down with a counselor and mapped out. It's been all over the place. And that's something that you have to learn to be comfortable with as you're carving out this career trajectory in emerging technologies. Knowing how to make your own path is pretty much the easiest thing to know about yourself, but the hardest thing to believe. Because it means that as much as I don't like this buzzword applied to technologies, it means you have to disrupt your understanding of yourself. It means you have to be willing to take risks, to put yourself out there, and to really genuinely listen to the things that your body and your brain have been telling you for your entire life. So I mentioned platforms, I mentioned community. One of the best things that you can do if you're looking for a career path in a technology field that isn't standardized and well understood by everyone in the tech industry, finding people who will learn with you, support you, lift you up when you've fallen down or you're doubting yourself is probably one of the best things you can do. And for any of you in this room, if that applies to you and you want to learn about virtual or augmented reality, please reach out to me. I will be happy to help because I am incredibly excited about the future of this technology and where it can go. So would I tell everybody in this room, go find a YouTube video and change your entire life based on what it says? No, I would not. But here's what I would tell you. Oh, I got too excited. I'm missing a slide. I'll tell you anyway. There were 4 things. The first, find that community. Find the people who are willing to learn with you. If you can't find that community, ask people to help you find other people. Whether that's on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or in-person events like the one that we're at now. Find the people who will learn with you and create community if you don't have it. I was incredibly fortunate to find several other incredible women who were starting their own journeys working on virtual reality technologies around the same time I was. And together, we were able to support each other and teach each other the things that we had brought from our previous background and support each other as we were learning all of these different things. It's critical to find people who will support you through that. The second thing is take action on how you want to change the world. Because for me, I was sitting around waiting for someone to tell me how I was going to be able to have an impact. And in emerging technologies, that doesn't happen because people are just trying to figure out how the stuff works, much less how somebody can truly have an impact. And that answer is going to be different for everybody. That answer is not going to be the same as my path. What I brought to my career in the industry is not going to be the same as any other person in there. And it's up to each and every one of us to figure out how the different skills that we have can be applied to these new fields. And you do deserve to change the world with that, by the way. I said 4, that was 2. I don't have the slide, so I'm gonna try to decide on a couple of other things on the fly. 3, listen to yourself in terms of how you're deciding to make the decisions about what to learn. And don't listen to people who are telling you that you're doing it right or wrong. Because people, I've met a few of them in the tech industry, perhaps some of you have too, will be very happy to tell you all of the things that you're doing wrong. It's not true. There are not right and wrong ways to make an impact in the world. And lastly, as part of that last point, get excited about it. Because if something's really hard for you to be learning and you're forcing yourself to do it, and by the way, to that point, everyone is capable of learning things. It might not always feel like it's true, but everybody is capable of learning how to do the things that they want to do. If you're not excited about it and you're dragging your feet and you don't want to be doing it, it may not be the right thing. And that goes back to not listening to people who are telling you there's one right or wrong way to do something. In emerging technology, specifically in virtual reality, I cannot tell you the number of times a technology has been the next thing, the huge thing that everyone's going to do, the standard, the right thing, and that thing has disappeared like 6 months to a year later. If you feel like your gut is telling you you have to learn a specific thing, you have to do something, you want to do something, listen to that. Society today does not always celebrate when we know what's best for us. It does not celebrate us taking those risks to listen to our gut, and it's time that we change that. Thank you.